I'm going to talk here about Dharma Chart, Karma Chart. Now, it's been a long journey since I first became interested in things like astrology. That was back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. And I don't know if history has always had such a sharp and exponential curve, but I do know that so much happened so fast back in the 1960s that I cannot possibly tell someone who wasn't there, at least in words, how it was. I'm reminded of this line from the poet Yeats, and it comes close, and I quote, "Because the mountain grass cannot but keep the form where the mountain hare has lain." So once the door of astrology was open to me, I burned through all of the books on the subject, and it went from those books straight into the mind itself. And the mind is where all the treasures of the ages can always be found, a library that never grows old. When being asked, in all the world of astrology, what single concept is the most precious to me, it would have to be the discovery of what I call the Dharma Chart, and that's what I'm going to present here as best I can. The Dharma for each one of us is simply the particular path to awakening, to finally getting it, that will work for us personally, our personal path. There are said to be 84,000 dharmas, so it's clear that one size does not fit all. And when I asked my Dharma teacher of 30-some years about the value of astrology, which all the Tibetans use, they use astrology, his answer was this. He said, astrology is one of the limbs of the yoga, a relative truth, but not the root. Dharma is the absolute root. In other words, astrology is a relative truth, which means that it's good for helping us to make progress in getting around from here to there in our lives, on the periphery of the sphere of life, but it cannot take us to the center of that sphere. Only the Dharma can do that. And by Dharma, it's meant, or at least here, that it's our personal Dharma path that we have yet to find, or we're in the process of finding and treading. The one that actually works for us, that wakes us up. Heaven knows I tried to mine the traditional astrological chart for my Dharma path. All astrologers do. We each need to find the path to awakening in this life. Nothing else is as important as knowing our particular Dharma path, the key to how we can wake up and become aware and eventually be realized. You can be sure that I studied my natal chart for many years, trying to figure out the puzzle that's me. I did not then know that there was another way of looking at my astrology. In fact, there was another complete chart that is also a map of my particular Dharma path. My discovery of the Dharma chart was actually a double discovery, because at the very same moment that I could read my Dharma from a chart, I realized that the traditional chart I had been using all this time was a chart of my karma, not a chart of my Dharma. And all this time I've been trying to read my Dharma from my karma chart, which is the traditional astrological, geocentric, earth-centered chart. Now, of course, the Dharma and karma charts, these two different views of us, these two different astrological, actually astronomical charts, are related. And when trying to decipher one's Dharma from looking at one's karma, it's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult. I could never get enough of my Dharma from reading my traditional karma chart, the traditional geocentric natal chart that all astrologers use. And in my experience, the number of astrologers who seriously know the Dharma chart are few to none, in my opinion. And yet the Dharma chart has been there staring us in the face for over 400 years, 500 years. Long ago, most astrologers just choose to ignore and not to look at it. And the only folks who looked at the Dharma chart centuries ago are what today we call astronomers. And even they ignore its spiritual aspects. And to me, the spiritual path is the essence of a life lived. Back then, astronomers were also astrologers, and astrologers astronomers. But when the astronomer-astrologer Copernicus pointed out to the world that in fact everything does not revolve around us, around the earth, as we had always liked to imagine and believed, but in truth, earth revolves around the sun. And this was news, and it was news that not everyone took in or accepted. In that moment of discovery, some 500 years ago, we suddenly had two astronomical charts at hand. The traditional Earth-centered chart that had been used for centuries, and this new sun-centered chart that Copernicus had just pointed out. However, rather than embracing that sun-centered heliocentric chart and using two charts, as the astronomers do, most astrologers turned away from it and simply ignored it. However, the astrologers back then, who went on to become the astronomers of today, embraced both the new heliocentric sun-centered chart and the traditional geocentric earth-centered chart. And they continue to this day to use two charts. Astronomers were empowered by this new chart, and literally, as they say, the rest is history. And we all know that astronomy and botany are the two oldest academic disciplines, academic professions. So the astronomers must have done something right. Now, mathematically, it is possible to derive the Dharma chart, the heliocentric chart, from the karma chart, geocentric chart, because it's just another way of viewing the very same birth moment, the very same planets, an instant in time, only from a different angle or perspective. And of course, that is what astrologers try to do. However, this is extremely difficult, like bending over backward, when it is just so much easier to read one's dharma or life path from the heliocentric natal chart, which is the natural Dharma chart. We are each entangled in the midst of our karma, our life. And the traditional astrological geocentric chart is just a perfect map of our karma, of our personality and life circumstances. Yet the key to grasping and unraveling karma, our karma, has always been the particular Dharma path we are on, the archetype. And your personal Dharma path, your key to awakening, is probably very different from my own. The heliocentric Dharma chart is a map of our path to waking up, how we can awaken. Now, I've shouted this from the rooftops for over 40 years, but this message has still to be heard. So let me try once again. The traditional geocentric astrology chart that astrologers have used for hundreds of years is nothing more or less than a snapshot of the solar system from the point of view of Earth. And Earth is embedded deep within that solar system. It's one view or perspective of that larger solar system. Wouldn't you like to see a chart or map of the entire solar system, which would be heliocentric, that we astrologers are so busy taking snapshots of with our geocentric charts? Because that's what I'm talking about here. When I first got into astrology, the idea of a Dharma chart did not exist, at least for me. Back then, there were no home computers, not even a simple 4-function calculator. Every astrology chart was done laboriously by hand, using pencil, paper, books, log tables, and only a few people could do it or would take the time to do it, but that's another story. Studying my astrology chart in the early 1960s, my geocentric traditional chart, gave me an alternate way of looking at myself. Call it a second opinion, and some relief from the toxic psychological descriptions of that time. Labels that were then all the rage. Words like paranoid, manic depressive, schizophrenic, etc. That was how people like myself, people my age, we grew up thinking about ourselves. And this was not at all helpful for a young person. Anyway, I soon identified my astrology chart as opposed to all the psychological jargon that was a description of me, and I inhaled from that chart its alternate description of who I was compared to the labels that society had tried to pin on my generation. I just assumed that the standard astrology chart of me that we all know was somehow a map of my spirituality as well, or whatever we can agree to call it, when instead it was a map of my karma, the circumstances and personality in which I found myself living. Valuable? Of course, but it was nowhere near an overview, much less a map of how I might wake up and take advantage of my life, use my karma, create different karma. It did not clearly show a path, and back then I really needed a path, because I had struggled to glean specks of spiritual truth from my geocentric natal chart, when just by looking at my own birth moment from another, more inclusive perspective, the path became clear to me. And when I finally discovered the Dharma chart, it flipped me. And this is something that you need to listen carefully to. Keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, back then there were no astrology programs. I was the first person in the world to program astrology on home computers and make those programs available to my fellow astrologers on a regular basis. And this was in 1977, when computers for home use were brand new. According to an article done on me and my company, Matrix Software, done for Red Herring magazine, the company I founded, Matrix Software, is the second oldest software company still on the internet. The only older company is a little company called Microsoft. So that should tell you something. This was back then a wild frontier. Anyway, as a programmer, I naturally found myself exploring and programming various astrological techniques. And one of these techniques was heliocentric, and heliocentric chart, sun-centered astrology. I knew nothing about it. For me, it was just one more technique to program, something to figure out, and then learn how to interpret. So there I was, peering through the lens of my traditional natal chart at this novel heliocentric perspective of myself, this new chart I held in my hands, and trying to make sense of what I saw there because it was different. And the helio chart gave a very different take on me, on who I was, what I was capable of, and so forth. I thought to myself, this chart is really me. And without realizing it, I had fallen down the rabbit hole and was about to go through an earth change in consciousness. Because before I knew it, before I was aware of it even, I was identifying more with my heliocentric chart than with the traditional geocentric chart I was used to, and I had studied it for years and years and years. So it was a big wow. So please think about that for a moment. The traditional astrology chart had been my whole world, astrologically speaking. And I had just transferred my identification from that chart to another chart, and a chart that, in my opinion, was a more complete view of myself. Because in the helio chart, I found the spirituality that I had always tried to intuit from my geocentric birth chart. Because here indeed was a Dharma chart, a chart of my Dharma. That was something. And this Dharma chart was the me that I had always felt I was inside. But I never had any confirmation, or at least not enough confirmation, in my regular geocentric chart. And before I knew it, I was inside the helio chart full time and looking out at the world through my personality, through my traditional natal chart, rather than the reverse, where I had previously been, like an outsider looking in, always looking inward, trying to find the deeper, more spiritual aspects of astrology. So there I was, suddenly on the inside of the heliocentric chart, identifying with it as myself and looking out for the first time. I tell you, it was empowering, to say the least, and it felt so natural. And that's what I meant earlier when I said I flipped it. I flipped. I somehow transferred the seat of my consciousness, transmigrated, to a deeper center, and finally identified myself as a spiritual being, this spiritual being, a traveler on a path to awakening. So if anyone asks, is consciousness transference possible? I'm here to tell you it is, because it happened to me right in life. Looking through the prism of my heliocentric chart, everything began to fall into line. It was a superior view, an overview, which is what I most needed at the time. I needed to see something about the big picture. And although, of course, I still use my karma chart all the time, I have never gone back to that old natal chart view of my spirituality in the geocentric chart, because for me it was through a glass darkly, to borrow that phrase. The heliocentric Dharma chart, it's the natural way to view our spirituality. An inner self, a chart of our Dharma, looking from inside through the lens of our personality, which is the karma chart, which became the child chart. In the heliocentric chart became the mother chart. And I was looking from within the helio chart out through my traditional natal chart, my karma chart, out into the world. All of my life I'd been an outsider trying to get in. I didn't know myself. The helio Dharma chart introduced me to myself, and I'm forever grateful. And I found that my consciousness is seated not only on Earth, but also at the center of the sun. Behind our personality and circumstances, behind the geocentric chart, is a spiritual being and path, a helio chart. I hope that makes sense to some of you. These two charts, the Dharma chart and the karma chart, are just different views of the exact same moment in time. The very same planets, etc. Of course, each view is intricately embedded in the other. If only we could unravel it. But there's no need. we have both charts to look at. People say I'm a heliocentric astrologer, but the truth is I'm both. I'm a heliocentric, and I use both charts, but because I use the helio they don't use, then I am kind of typed as a heliocentric astrologer, when really you have to have both charts in hand to do anything. So I have to laugh, and I mean, when I think of how many years I struggled to read my Dharma chart out from the standard traditional geocentric natal chart, but it wasn't designed for that. I believe the psychologist Carl Jung would have called the Dharma chart our archetype, the tribe we belong to. And it takes, as mentioned, two views or perspectives to triangulate, to get a stereo view. And in astrology, it's possible to look at the planets and your birth moment from different perspectives or angles, from views other than the standard natal chart, the one that's been used for the last millennium. In fact, without some differential for comparison, how is anything known? One of my favorite jazz tunes of all time is a song by Les McCann called, humorously enough, Compared to What? With two or more perspectives, we can triangulate. We can get a three-dimensional view of something. In this case, it would be of our essential nature, where we came from, who we are, why we're here, and what we're doing. The Dharma chart and the Karma chart naturally complement one another because they are simply two different views of the same planet at the same moment of our birth. The Dharma chart is a view of who we are on the inside, and the Karma chart is a view of what we are up against on the outside, what we have to deal with and go through in this life. In hierarchy, the Dharma chart is the key to our karma. Just as in Buddhism, Dharma is the key to all karma. The helio is the mother chart, and as I mentioned, the geocentric traditional natal chart is the child. Now, it took me some 40 years to reduce the complexity of the helio chart pattern to something communicable. And so I'm going to stop here for a moment. I want to introduce you to what I call star types, life path partners. Now, star types is a life path astrology, interpreting large-scale planetary patterns in the sky by looking at astrological charts in the sky above and charting the Dharma, or life path of an individual, and their primary relationship role down here on Earth. And you don't have to be an astrologer to understand this, because the astrology used here is graphic, an open window into who we are, why we are here, and what on earth we might be good for, our life purpose. And I've created a whole set of image cards to make it easy to remember. And star types image cards make it easy to get a picture of our personal life path archetype, a graphic image of our inner self and the particular journey that we're on in our life. And that's why it's often called our Dharma chart. We all have some sense of who we are, but much of what we know about ourselves may be as much the result of our upbringing and our surroundings as our own personal self-discovery. Regardless of how much self-discovery you may have experienced, astrology can offer an additional view on whatever idea you now may have of yourself. Call it a second opinion. Getting a second and an outside opinion can make all the difference in how we see ourselves. So it's one thing to have some idea of yourself, and quite another to find just where you belong in this world, although the two are closely connected. We have to know who we are before we can know where we fit in and why we have come to this life and what we will are best fit to do. So some might say this approach is about finding your tribe, the particular group of individuals in this world that you by nature belong to and have always been a part of. You have been looking for them, and they have been looking to find you. When you meet one another in this life, there will be mutual recognition and delight, for you have always belonged together. You're part of the same tribe. And this is even true, more true when it comes to finding your life partner, the one person you are meant to be closest to in this life. Finding just the right chemistry with another person is perhaps the main focus of Star Types astrology, because Star Types is about finding who you are and where on earth you might fit in and belong, and it's not about learning a lot of astrology jargon. In fact, much of this course, this presentation, is pure graphics, making it easy to learn and remember. Many of us are waiting to be discovered, waiting to be found by someone for some reason. And waiting around to be found or discovered for who you really are is not the exception on this planet. It's more like the rule. Almost all of us, at least secretly, dream of being found and cherished, of fitting into just the spot that exists somewhere for us, and with just the right, perfect life partner and the group of people who will love and accept us just as we are. And there's a reason we all share this dream to one degree or another. Most of us find it hard to rest in this life until we have either discovered ourselves or have been discovered and valued. And I'm talking about at the deepest level, valued by those around us. This is not just something to hope for. It's something that needs to happen in our life for each of us to feel whole. This is a dream we all share. Even so, there's not much day-to-day mention by society about this dream that we each have of being found and cherished, of being recognized. But that dream still exists, nevertheless. It seems somehow that society is embarrassed if any of us dare to mention that we want some attention, at least enough attention to know that we belong somewhere and to someone, and that we are here for some worthwhile purpose. It's funny that we seem socially to be embarrassed for others to get what we each yearn for ourselves. Most of us don't mind getting a little attention once in a while, at least I don't. If we've been waiting a long time to be recognized and can't wait any longer to be found and discovered, we just have to get on with the business of discovering ourselves. That's the whole deal. That's the way it works. If you are not being discovered and are tired of waiting, you can always learn to discover yourself. That's what I've had to do. Not that I'm anywhere near done with that process. And if we're tired of waiting for the right life partner to come along magically, we can do something about that as well. And the best way I know to cause the universe to send out a partner tailored just for us is to get busy discovering something about our own self. It's almost a law of nature that those who find or discover themselves in this life are the most attractive to others. They have a certain authenticity, and as we find ourselves, others can suddenly see us too. Finding out something about who you are is like a magnet when it comes to attracting others. And this teaching is about that, finding out who you are. We call it self-discovery. And self-discovery is just that, discovery of our own inner self. It does not matter how, where, or when we do it. The result is going to be the same. In fact, it would almost appear that there are only ways or different paths to self-discovery. That's how tired we all are of waiting. And the process of self-discovery is what this teaching is all about. And although there are many possible roads to self-discovery, here we're going to learn to discover ourselves through the crystal prism of astrology. Say a little bit about modern astrology. The approach of this teaching is a little different than most modern astrological texts, which tend to focus on the astrology of our personality. Because here we will look more at the astrology of our inner self, or what sometimes is called our archetype or soul. And it's what I call the Dharma Chart. We all have personalities on the outside, and we have some kind of soul or center within us. Somewhere between this outer personality on the one hand and the absolute, call it God, the eternal essence, total awareness on the other, are styles or general ways of being. These have been called archetypes by some, lineages by others, and tribes by still others. So what tribe do you belong to? What I'm referring to here is the general relationship group to which each of us belongs. And we do each have such a group, even though many of us have not yet found that group or have been found by our group. Because those that we're looking for are also looking for us. We can't help but look around through life to see where we belong and look for the members of the group or tribe we belong to. Discovering yourself or being discovered for whomever you are is a really big deal. It's true for most of us. In fact, finding a comparable, compatible life partner is crucial. Most of us search for this. And I should say something about what star types astrology is good for and what you can expect from this approach. Star types makes it easy, astrologically speaking, to find your Dharma chart, your general life path, and your approach to relationships. The role that you tend to take on when it comes to partners, friends, and co-workers. There are a number of classic relationship roles, also called relationship families, and they're going to be described in this teaching. And once you know your personal star type and understand something about the relationship family to which you belong, then you're ready to examine star types of others to see who you fit with or who you don't fit with. Of course, looking for your present partner or potential partner star type is going to be key, as will looking at the star types of your family, your friends, and coworkers. Once you learn this technique, you can look at anyone you meet and get a sense of what tribe they belong to. And I created a whole series of images that can be used. I call them star type cards. And with them, it's easy to check compatibility, and we don't need any technical astrological knowledge to do so. All of the Astro Image star type cards are color-coded, so you can spot a potential partner by just looking at the border color of their card. So how to get started with that? Star Types offers a very good method for discovering yourself. Better yet, because you'll be using easy-to-recognize graphic cards to represent various astrological patterns, You don't have to learn any technical astrology. You don't even have to be an astrologer. In fact, it might be easier if you're not. And keep in mind that if we could easily figure out how to discover ourselves, we would all have done it by now. And so, if we have not somehow found ourselves, then we might just need a method. And what follows here is just a method. It works and it's fun to use. I have worked with it for over 50 years myself, and I have found it so helpful as a guide to the people that I have come to know in my life. And although I'm talking here, I will give you the link to a text, a free ebook that's available that has all of these images in it. And we all like images. A picture's worth 1,000 words, you know that. Tarot cards is something most of you also are familiar with, or at least have seen. So I have reduced many of the complex astrological configurations to simple pattern images, and I've written matching interpretive text. I then designed tarot-like cards based on these astrological patterns and images, and gave them clear names and even reference numbers. With that in mind, let's get into star types. Let's start out with the kinds of star types, the kind of tribes that there are. As mentioned earlier, there appear to be several distinct star type families, archetypes, or styles of being that are in this world, and we each belong to one or another of them. We can call them tribes or lineages or whatever you want. But we will now look at the main star type relationship families, since so much of star types is about personal chemistry and attraction. So let's start there. What is it about some individuals, for example, movie stars or other celebrities, that fascinate us? We all know that they are good-looking or look good, and we can see that. And they are charismatic and magnetic. But what is that? What is charisma or magnetism that so attracts us? It's like asking, what is beauty? And that's my point. Regardless of the cause, we all respond to charisma, to the star quality in certain individuals. But what is it in these individuals that holds our gaze, that turns us into the proverbial deer in the headlights? We can't seem to look at them enough, can't get enough of whatever it is they're putting out or transmitting. It's kind of a celebrity status. And what is this mysterious attractive force? And yet we all know it when we see it. Some individuals transmit, and others receive. Celebrities appear to be huge transmitters, just radiating information of one kind or another, information that the rest of us can't seem to get enough of, can't help but want to receive more of. What is it about our favorite song from the past? For me, it was old 45s, that we don't mind listening to again and again after all these years, and we still manage to pull something out of the experience, something that we take in and absorb. What is this something that we absorb? What is that? And the same goes for our favorite book, poem, work of art, or movie. There are some movies that I find myself watching again and again, and what is it that I'm getting out of that experience? These are some of the questions that should be held in mind when learning about star types. Ideas as to what beauty or charisma are, in fact, all so-called occult or esoteric knowledge and study is nothing more than an attempt on our part to see the obvious, often what is so commonly or openly present that we as a society have lost all awareness of it, like the air that we breathe or the thoughts that we think. Experiences like attraction are ubiquitous. And if we are to have any awareness of them at all, we need some way, some means to remind or remember that they are always already there, because we are that. And of course, that's what meditation is all about, reminding ourselves that we are there. Be here now, right? And another article might be written just on that, but for now, let's just move on. Talk for a moment about charisma. Let's agree that there's something in some people that we find attractive, that we are drawn to it like the proverbial moth to a flame. Our favorite movie star might be an example. They're putting out something that we can't seem to get enough of. Something that makes us stop and stare, transfixed, as we absorb and take them in. We are the receivers, and the movie star is the transmitter. They radiate, and we bask in the light. Something, however, is exchanged, but we don't really know what that something is. There are no books or articles I know of on this subject, but we can instantly recognize that this takes place. Some would say that nothing else but this kind of transaction takes place in the world, this sending and receiving, this information exchange. What we call it is communion, communication. What that information that is exchanged is might be very hard to put our finger on. But we'd have to agree that we each spend a lot of time involved in this process of transmitting and or receiving. After all, it's pretty much what we call being social. Go to your nearest party or get-together and look around. There will be those that we would call the life of the party, and those wallflower types who stand back and observe. Those who take it in and observe the life of the party. Those are two archetypes. To make sense out of what I'm about to present, we will have to agree that there's something about some people that we do find attractive and vice versa. Some may even find us attractive. It's all relative. But the phenomenon I'm pointing out here is omnipresent. This transmitting and receiving of a certain subtle something. There are different styles. That being said, I'm sure you want to check out which star types represent those very charismatic individuals. The charismatic family of star types all have red borders in the graphic images, like the card being shown you here. So you can't mistake them. In fact, there are 4 main relationship families, and each have a different colored border. So let's go through the 4 relationship families, starting with the 2 most classic relationship roles, that of the lover and the loved one. And we don't have to look far to find manifestations of these great principles and their dynamic interplay at the human level. The world's bards and poets have done little else than serenade us with the stories of relationships, stories of Romeo and Juliet, of the lover and the loved one. And it turns out that these 2 classic relationship roles, lover and loved one, are just what 2 of the key star type families show. Not only are these 2 cosmic star type patterns present and accounted for, but they're omnipresent. By and far the most important relationship roles on the planet, that of the lover and the loved one. Which one are you predominantly? In fact, just about all relationships, sooner or later, resolve themselves into these 2 roles. One of the partners takes on the role of the lover. They pick up the socks. While the other becomes the loved one. They're adored, taken care of. It's almost like a law of physics. And it's not to say that they might not take on opposite roles or different roles in a different relationship. I'm talking about any given relationship most often results in one person being more of the lover and the other one more of the cherished one. And what was amazing to me is that it is easy to see which role each of us will play in any given relationship just by looking at the star type cards for the two partners. And we'll get to that soon. And when you download the free ebook, at the back of that book is an ephemeris, a listing for all modern dates as to which type that day is. So you just look up your birthday and you can know your star type card, or pretty close to it. So using this method, you can examine your own relationships, past and present. And no matter how finely you want to equalize any relationship, sooner or later, one of the two partners will end up picking up the dirty socks first, thus taking on the role of what we call the lover or caretaker of the relationship, while the other partner acquiesces into the role of being cared for, that of the loved one. This is something akin to the law of gravity, in my opinion. It's axiomatic that relationships, almost by definition, sooner or later resolve themselves by polarity. And the two poles or roles are that of the lover or caretaker, the worrier, and the loved one or object of affection, the what me worry type. It's not a choice, but an inevitability. Like the little dog magnets that I had as a kid. One partner attracts and the other flips around and assumes the opposite polarity or role. If this flip does not happen, then real problems soon emerge in the relationship. Two alphas don't mix. All of this is pretty much a given, this old hat. What is new here is that until star types, I had no way to clearly distinguish which partner in a relationship would assume which role. Star types offers a clear and graphic way to examine relationships and resolve them into their classic roles, that of the loved one and the lover. So let's just take a look at them. We'll be going into a lot more detail about each of these star type families in the written book, just because it's huge, huger. We're going to go into much more detail about each of the star type families, but let's be sure that we're clear about, in general, what colors represent which relationship family. There are 4 colors and 4 families. The red bordered star type cards are reserved for the loved one, that family. The star types with all the charisma that we spoke of earlier, and there's more about that soon. The green bordered cards represent the lover, the caretaker of the relationship, that family. These are the main observers and annotators of the red cards, the watchers, the lovers. When both qualities, loved one and lover, appear in the same card, in the same chart, these are what are called the independent star types, and their borders are blue. And last, a small group of star types called multi-relationship star types. Types have rose-colored borders. The star type cards you will encounter will have red, green, blue, and rose borders. There are a few other cards which are not main star types, and they have cream-colored borders. There are smaller patterns. These are smaller patterns that make up what we call an astrological toolbox, and more of that you can find in the book. So let's start with the red-bordered cards. With the red-bordered cards, you have the classic form of the loved one, the object of everyone's affection, the one who always demands and gets lots of attention, plenty of service and care. And this is as it should be, because they are warm and just exude charm. and they're usually the centerpiece of any group. They're at the center, group leader often. Everyone loves to be with the red cards because they're not self-conscious. They love to have fun, and they pretty much guarantee you a good time. I always say, if you're in trouble and need advice, seek out a green-bordered star type. But if you want to have dinner, a dinner partner, or just have some fun, grab a red star type, for that's where the fun starts. These red card types are, above all, people persons, and they like to get right in there and work a crowd, glad-handing with the best of them. They radiate charisma and shine in almost in any setting. Of course, they make the best salesmen because they sell themselves just by being with you. Who can resist? These red cards are so very watchable. This does not mean they have to be the best looking physically, but regardless of how they look, they're magnetic, charismatic. They shine, and everybody just loves to be around them and to spend time with them. Unless we think that life for these red cards are all roses, let's touch a bit on their darker side. For all of their socialness, they're also very private, and they guard their privacy. They don't like to be crowded and hate to be boxed in. Perhaps because they are always in such demand, they are in their own way claustrophobic, and they worry a lot about their intelligence. Perhaps because they're so simple and direct in their appeal, they feel everybody loves them for their shine and sparkle, for their bodies, for how they look or act, and not for their intellect. And there's some truth to that, of course, and this can be a real problem for the red-bordered star-type family because they are afraid of appearing stupid. In fact, they often will go to great lengths to study and go to school. They will collect learning degrees, diplomas, and whatever makes them appear more refined and sophisticated. These red card star types like the fine and the frilly things and are quick to put on airs to appear more sophisticated, more knowing than they in fact are. And this can be a lifelong problem. And they can at times also lack awareness. They're not so aware of themselves. They tend to see the trees but not the forest. They can have real problems grasping the big picture, and sometimes it's wise for them to seek out the advice of the green star types who can give them direction, who do see the big picture, and help them to better see where they're going in life. In dynamic relationship roles, red cards are the ones that involve real attraction, the kind that romance novels epitomize. This red star type inevitably plays the role of the loved one, as I mentioned. The one who gets all the attention, the one who's cared for. These are high-maintenance types, so take note. Now we'll go to the green-bordered star types. I'm just trying to give you a rough picture. I mean, you're going to have to do this for yourselves by experience, but I'm giving you mine, which might not be the best for you, but it's just the best I've got. Anyway, the green-bordered star types, this star type family represents the archetype of the lover, the one who cares the most in a relationship. And thus, for all practical concerns, they are the caretakers of the relationship. They're the ones who endlessly care for and worry about the loved one, running here and there to provide for their well-being. They are the eternal hosts, seldom the guest of any relationship. They are the ones who jump up and get you a glass of water, who happily do any organizational work, any planning that needs to be done. And they're not at home in a crowd. This star type can be found mostly around the edges of a group, watching, perhaps criticizing, the wallflowers, but always taking it all in. And they run cool when others, like the red cards, run warm or hot. They think and plan when others do not, and they serve while others are served. They care when care is needed. In Eastern religions, like Tibet and China, they could be said to represent the bodhisattva path, living to serve others. They like to do that. Here in the West, the concept of serving others is downgraded to the concept of manual labor. Serving others. Here in America, it's considered much more cool to be served than to serve. But this concept is slowly changing. Not all of us are miniature rock stars fit to shine in the heart of a crowd. Some of us are quite happy to watch, to comment on, to criticize, and to care for others. Since both types, the lover and the loved one, occur at almost equal numbers, not all of us can be the one who gets served. Some of us must do the serving and actually like to serve others. And the fact is, if this star type can get past the social stigmata of serving others, they happen to enjoy it a lot more, for it's natural to them. In fact, all of the green-bordered star types are born to serve and to care for others. They're like little bodhisattvas. All reach for the mind to do something before they reach to press the flesh. They're shy. All are, at heart, eager for experience. As I said, shy and glad to be included. Not much into hugs. They all secretly love to be hugged. And physical contact for them is an exciting event. Sounds like E.T., right? Well, not quite from outer space, but they are very at home in the great space of the mind, and they all tend to make their living using their wits and mental capabilities rather than their charisma and warm presence. They can think, they can see, and many of them really get the big picture, and they can see the forest as well as the trees. They are the great providers of advice to the rest of us. They are wicked critics and are as sharp with the mind as others are physically fast. And these are the green cards, the green-bordered cards, star types. And as a rule, as I mentioned, this type of chart is very compassionate, always appreciating a situation for what it is, making room for others, making allowances, being kind. So, what can you know when you meet one of the green star types? Well, first of all, you can expect a sharp mind. Perhaps a very, very broad in scope, but probably at least facile and detail-oriented. If you will let them, that is, if you can assume the role of an object, a loved one, someone to be cared for, they will probably be happy to assume the role of your protector and caretaker. If you meet them with criticism, mental arguments, you're in for a tussle because this is their turf and they own it. But as mentioned, if you just sit still and let them look after you, more often than not, these green-bordered star types, they will do just that. On the outside, they may appear tough or even wrathful, but inside they're easy and will always give way. They are the art of Aikido personified. Now let's talk about another family, what I call the blue-bordered star types. And as for compare this type to the two classic relationship types, not everyone is just one type or the other. That is, not everyone is either simply the red-bordered star type, T-square, the loved one, or the green-bordered star type, Grand Trine, the lover. Some charts have both archetypes present in a single chart. What about that? For starters, while the other main star types need each other to have a relationship, here we have a star type family that is in no way that needy. They have the role and the loved one locked up in their own birth chart. They may not require much in the way of outside relationship at all. This star type is self-sufficient to a great degree, and thus this type has earned the nickname of independent, and you can spot them because their astro image cards all have blue borders. With this group of star types, the blue cards, with this group we have a combination of the lover and the loved one in a single star type, all wrapped in one. We could say that they are capable of loving themselves, and that's so true. They really are self-sufficient and often somewhat independent of relationships in general from time to time. This is not to say they do not have or enjoy relationships, for they most certainly do. However, they are not as dependent on relationship as, say, the red and the green types. They can take relationships, and they can also be quite content just being out on their own. Perhaps because they contain within themselves all the necessary elements of a basic relationship, the lover and the loved one, this star type can play either role with an external partner, giving care and love to a red star type and receiving care and attention from the green types. So they're kind of ambidextrous, so to speak, having it both ways or having none at all. Perhaps best of all, they have the vision and foresight of the green star types and some of the charisma and fun-loving nature of the red star types. As mentioned, depending on their partner, they can play either role, or they can not want to have a partner at all. They can see what to do and also how to do it, and all of this without any outside help, thus the term independent, which indeed they are. As for a downside for the blue cards, well, there's not a lot. They kind of have it all, if being self-sufficient is a goal. If anything, they can be lazy because it's easy in this society to fall into the habit of playing the loved one and being taken care of or being served. The blue star types often end up in this role and don't get a lot done because of this habit. And this is because they're already somewhat complete. They're just not so driven to the same extent as the red and green star type cards are. They're just not needy, but they also are not driven by needs. And they like being a little bit to themselves. They're not so dependent on others. This lack of dependency on others can make them appear aloof and even a little cool. Perhaps they pay some small social price for this condition, but mostly they're quite content just with themselves. Other star types may find this annoying. You get the idea. When you're dealing with a blue card, a blue-bordered star type, be careful not to interpret their independence too personally. It's not you that they mean to offend. They just don't need anyone all that much, including you. Nothing personal. Now let's take a look at the last of the four tribes, the relational, what I call multi-relationship, relational star types. When I first began studying star types, I soon found that there were two classic relational archetypes. As I've mentioned, the lover and the loved one, the green and the red bordered cards. And then there were also charts that contained both archetypes. These are the dual archetype charts with blue borders. But it was a good number of years before I was forced through experience to realize there was at least one more main family or tribe star type. The case where all planets were concentrated or squashed into one part of the chart with no planetary spread at all. And I came to understand that this was basically a thirst for experience type. In its perfect form, this star type has all planets within a 120-degree trine aspect of the chart wheel. Thus their nickname, within a trine. Everything was in one area of the chart, an area less than 120 degrees, and the rest was completely empty. What was at first odd about the star type is that the sheer compactness gave them some similarity to the T-square red line star types, but very different. And the sheer emptiness of the rest of the chart gave them some space-like quality of the grand trine, green line chart star types. But they really do comprise a star type family all of their own. We mark this group of star types with a rose border so they are easily identified. And this star type family is quite unlike the other three families in that they are neither dependent nor independent, just different. If anything, they're dependent or needy, if you have to go one way or the other. And the other three star type groups consist of planetary patterns that take up the whole 360-degree wheel. This is why they're often called whole chart patterns. However, these rose-colored multi-relational star types, it does not have a whole chart pattern in the same sense. Although their pattern, oddly enough, takes up the whole chart, it's just in a very small space, like 120 degrees. In the multi-relational star types, we have just the reverse of these other relationship families. These star types have all the planets in one little corner, one part of the wheel, all jammed together. Most of the wheel, as I mentioned, is completely blank, empty. And the net result is that these star types are neither naturally caregivers, lovers, or objects of attention, loved ones. Instead, they're more like objects of affection that care, if that twist of word can make any sense. In other words, they need attention, like the red star types, but they're also naturally much more mental, like the green star types. Mostly they're very compact and detail-oriented types that use their mind to get around more than they radiate charisma. Or we could say that they have a kind of mental charisma, which is almost an oxymoron. Yet these star types are so compact and dedicated that they radiate a kind of charisma all their own. Most of all, perhaps due to all that empty space, they have a great thirst, a great need for experience to make up for this lack, for all that they want. And this often takes the form of a need for relationships, of which they tend to have many. And they really grow through meeting and maintaining friendships of all kinds, sort of an endless chain of friends. They really need this to exist, unlike the other types that assume a particular role, red and green star types, or ones that are a little indifferent, like the blues. And these rose-colored star types, bordered, like to travel. Almost as important as relationships, this star type likes to see many places, as if somehow they're trying to fill that empty void within themselves. This group of rose-bordered star types are very hard workers who use their minds, often in very detailed and highly emotional ways, to move through life, kind of moving from life to life, relationship to relationship, like a monkey swinging through the trees. This chain of friends is how they learn about themselves. And the other three types are all grist for their mill. Because of each of these other types present areas of experience or interest in the multi-relationship. Anyway, this completes an overview of the four relationship types, the four families. And as mentioned above, the four families are easy to spot because they're color-coded. Each star type's card's border has the color of the relationship type to which it belongs. So here again is a brief summary of the four types. The two most traditional relationship types are those of the lover and the loved one. And each of us can play either role, depending on the star type of the person we're relating to. In other words, with some people we may play or are forced to play the role of lover, the caretaker, what my mom used to call the bigger person, be a bigger person, Michael. In that we pick up the socks, we clean up after the mess, probably simply because we care more and can't stand the mess, right? Yet with other people, we may end up being more of the loved one, with someone else taking care of us and cleaning up our mess. So the point is, our roles can change depending on who we are relating to. And that's what makes the world go round, as they say. The lover and the loved one are the Romeo and the Juliet, the archetype roles that make up the classic relationship that the bards have been singing about all these many centuries. By looking at the star-type astro image cards, we can see at a glance which persons may tend to enjoy and take on the role of the lover, the principal caretaker in a relationship, and which prefer to be the loved one, the one who gets all that attention and care. It is as simple as the seer and the seen. The lover is the one who sees and dotes on the loved one, the one who likes to be seen. But not all persons can be neatly grouped into the role of the lover and the loved one. Some folks have, as I mentioned, both qualities in themselves, and they make up a group that I call independence, because they really can do it all by themselves. They have both archetypes in one chart. In this way, the independent types are self-sufficient. They're less needy than the other two and tend to enjoy being alone on their own, which it does not mean they don't have relationships, because they do. However, they don't need relationships as much as the others, and sometimes they can go for quite a spell without feeling the need to interact a lot, often to the frustration of their partner. In this way, they are, just as their name suggests, more independent than the rest of us. When they do relate, just how they relate will depend on a combination of their particular chart qualities and what qualities are in their partner's chart. So we have the lover, the loved one, the independent. And as mentioned, when I first began to study relationships 40-some years, 50 years ago, I thought that was it, these three types. However, over time I came to understand there was one more type of relationship, which I termed multi-relational. And this brings the total of main types to 4. And the multi-relational type is just that. They require lots of relationships and contact. However, don't jump to the conclusion that I'm saying this type is promiscuous. That's not how I'm using the word relational, multi-relational. What I mean is that this particular type loves to meet new people and see new places, and never seems to tire or get enough of what the rest of us soon have had enough of, whatever we could agree that is. They just keep going, where the other types are ready to head home for the day. However, the multi-relational type is similar to the lover and loved one types, and they too are happiest in a relationship. They are needy in this way, while the independent types are not. Okay, that's it for now. Let's go read the book.